This is apropos. Well, a day after announcing that he delayed a major attack on Iran to allow time for diplomacy, Donald Trump is once again threatening that the US may decide to resume hostilities, plunging the region into further uncertainty. He says he's giving the regime a deadline of 2 or 3 days to agree a deal to end the war. Tehran says it will open new fronts if Trump does follow through on the warning. As Iran ramps up military pressure in the wider region at home, people are preparing for a fresh flare-up, as James Vazina reports.
It's a warning directed at the United States, threatening to scale up the war should the conflict resume. On Tuesday, Iran said that it would open new fronts if the US broke the ceasefire, as the army's spokesman said that it had used the pause to strengthen its military capabilities. The ceasefire came into place at the start of April, but with no deal in place, Donald Trump on Monday threatened to strike Iran and renewed those threats once more.
They're begging to make a deal. I hope we don't have to do the war, but we may have to give them another big hit. We may have to give them another big hit. I'm not sure yet.
Meanwhile, in Tehran, some civilians are learning how to handle assault rifles. Members of the Revolutionary Guard have been teaching them how to assemble, disassemble and shoot AK-47s, with training booths set up across the capital.
You can see it yourselves, the response from the people, from women and men. It's been extraordinary. It is entirely voluntary and spontaneous. The aim of this is to train defenders of our homeland and promote the culture of martyrdom to avenge the blood of our supreme leader.
On Monday, over 100 couples tied the knot in a mass wedding broadcast on state television. The newlyweds declared themselves ready to sacrifice their lives for the war, and Iran says that several millions of people have put their names forward for the scheme.
Well, for more on the situation in the Middle East, we're joined now by Dr. H.A. Hellyer, Senior Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Securities Studies, a think tank in London. Thanks so much, Doctor, for being with us on the programme this evening. We saw people in Iran there in that report preparing for potentially the worst after Donald Trump again threatening this week for the strikes on Iran if it doesn't come to the table. Just talk us through, remind us at this point what exactly are the main sticking points between the US and Iran. How do you get both sides to come to some kind of agreement, especially as Donald Trump is hoping for within a deadline of 2 to 3 days?
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure to be on your program. The sticking points are the same. They haven't really shifted since this war began, except, of course, now there's the additional problem of the Strait of Hormuz being effectively closed by the Iranians. But from the American side, the continual focus on the nuclear program, there isn't as much focus on the missile capacity and the associated militias and allied forces around the region. And the gap between the two sides, I think, remains really quite vast. The Iranians feel that they have prevailed in this conflict because, of course, the stated aim at the beginning of the conflict was regime change. There, of course, has not been regime change. The Iranian regime is very much still in control in Iran. I think that the reality, of course, is that the economic situation in Iran is extremely bad. The pummeling that the Americans and the Israelis have put upon Iranian military capacity is very substantial, but they're still in control. And they have taken control even more of the Strait of Hormuz, which, of course, is really causing a great deal of concern among Gulf Arab states as well. They did not want this war to take place in the first place, and they certainly don't want it to end with the Iranian regime in a more emboldened geopolitical position in the region.
And are they in a more emboldened position? We heard from a leading Democrat today saying in the US that the only thing that's changed when it comes to, for example, Iran's nuclear program is that the regime is now unwilling to negotiate about it, whereas before it might have been. Would you agree with that? Is Tehran actually becoming less willing to make concessions here, despite what we're hearing with these talks and indirect negotiations apparently taking place between the two sides?
I'm not sure I would agree completely with the assessment from the Democrat, but I do think that what's very clear is that the Iranians feel that the Americans cannot be trusted. They do not feel that there are sufficient guarantees to ensure that once this war is effectively declared over, that there simply won't be another strike in the future. And they remember that during two sets of negotiations, the Americans abruptly started bombing Iran. So the emboldening sort of nature of this, I think, is true. And I think that they are very concerned about the idea of presenting themselves as having been defeated in front of their backers and their supporters within Iran itself. And in Washington, they feel that they have the upper hand and that they demand, frankly, capitulation by the Iranians. And as long as these two sides have this massive gap between them and a very, very low amount of trust between them, it's very difficult to see how they're going to come to some sort of resolution, and certainly not in the next few days. I wouldn't necessarily take the next few days. The statement from the American president as being binding, because of course multiple times he's changed his own deadline. However, it does seem that the Americans are on battle alert. We know from Israeli media as well that they expect the war to resume at high intensity quite soon. And the rest of the region, of course, seems not interested in that at all. Donald Trump actually said that he called off the immediate resumption of high intensity fighting as a result of lobbying from Gulf Arab allies. So I think that there's really, again, a very huge mismatch, not just between the expectations between the Americans and the Iranians, but also among Gulf Arab states, which of course will have to live with whatever mess is left after this.
And on that point, when Donald Trump said that he'd called off this planned attack, do you think that was a mere pressure tactic from him, or is the US really preparing behind the scenes to reignite hostilities?
I don't know. It wouldn't be surprising if that was what took place, because, of course, we have seen that before. But I think that the Americans don't want to go back to war. They want to see some sort of resolution because, of course, this is having economic impacts within the United States itself. The war is incredibly unpopular in the United States, including, I should say, among Republicans. So the continuation of the war is not a vote winner. And the Trump administration will be going into the midterms relatively soon. And I think that they're very concerned more widely about how this places the American administration in good stead for those elections.
And of course, as you're reporting, the Russian president is currently in China for a two-day state visit. Donald Trump was, of course, there just a week ago. Now, he said earlier that Beijing had promised, in his words, not to send weapons or military equipment to support Iran. Can it be trusted on this point? And if so, how much difference would it actually make? Is Beijing actually putting pressure on Tehran behind the scenes, do you think?
It's hard to say what the Communist Party in China is actually thinking, but I think the indications appear to be that they simply don't want to take sides in this particular dispute. They want to be able to reap diplomatic benefits at the end of whatever happens, irrespective of who comes out more on top. They do not have a deciding vote in any of this. They cannot play a decisive or are unwilling to play a decisive role. So I think that their priority here is to ensure that when everything is over and done with, that the Chinese actually reap the diplomatic benefits.
And when it does come to the war on Iran and their position on it, do China and Russia have markedly different priorities, or are they more or less singing from the same hymn sheet here?
I think they are different. I think that Russia is more clearly aligned with Iran and sees any weakening of the American position in the region as obviously a win. because that makes their position de facto more strong. But again, I bring this back to powers in the region itself. They're the ones that are going to have to mop up the mess, as it were, or tolerate or put up with whatever Iranian regime policy is going to be after this. And I think that that's very concerning to them. Less decisive or less important in this regard, frankly, is what the Russians and the Chinese intend to do or are able to do. It's going to be, again, those populations in the region, the different Arab states, they're going to have to deal with an Iranian regime that is very angry, will consider all of those countries to have been permissive in terms of American security architecture in the region. And that doesn't bode well for a very stable Gulf going forward.
We'll have to leave it there for now. Thanks so much, though, for being with us as ever on the programme. That was Dr. H.A. Hellyer, Senior Associate Fellow at the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies in London.
Thank you. My pleasure.